Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've always been a dog person. Ever since I was little, I grew up with them thanks to my father, who's an attorney, and my mother, who worked at an animal shelter. They taught me everything about responsible pet ownership, and those lessons would come in handy in ways I never expected. 3 years ago, my husband and I moved to a new city for his job. We found a nice house to rent in a quiet middle-class neighborhood. I worked from home, and every day after work, I'd take my golden retriever on our usual walk. It became our routine, same route, same time, rain or shine. Over time, we got to know all the neighborhood dogs and their owners. One day, during our usual walk, I noticed the house had a new dog in the backyard, a massive English Mastiff. The yard had those invisible fence training flags, which immediately made me nervous. I'd seen enough dogs break through those barriers to know they're not foolproof. As we walked past, I took precautions. I kept my Golden on a short leash on the opposite side of me, away from the house. We made it past the house without incident, but that's when everything went wrong. Out of nowhere, this 100-pound Mastiff crashed into my leg and went straight for my dog. The sound of snarling and my dog's panic filled the air. I started screaming for help at the top of my lungs while managing to grab both dogs' collars, holding them apart. Neighbors came running out, but nobody from the Mastiff's house appeared. Finally, someone helped get the Mastiff back into its yard. That's when the owner pulled into the driveway. She was around my age, maybe early 30s. When she saw us, she immediately asked what had happened. I demanded to see her rabies vaccination records and city license. She apologized profusely, making excuses about how the dog was a rescue with a bad past and how she was saving up for training. While she was getting the documents, the unthinkable happened. The Mastiff pushed through the backyard gate again. The owner yelled at the dog to get back in the yard, but it completely ignored her command. The dog charged straight for us again. This time it pinned my Golden to the ground, locking its jaws around his head. I didn't think twice. I jumped right on top of them and forced the Mastiff's mouth open by grabbing its tongue and teeth. After the neighbors helped get the Mastiff inside, I checked my Golden. He had cuts all over his face, but thankfully his eyes were okay. I was shaking but trying to stay calm. I told her I would let her know if there were any issues and that we should be fine. I went home and called my dad since my husband was away on business. While cleaning up my dog, I realized I had a puncture wound on my leg from the attack. I ended up having to go to the emergency room, and my dog needed a vet visit the next day. I reported the incident to animal control, and they gave the owner a ticket. The Mastiff had to stay quarantined for a week. When I got my medical bill for $400, I brought it to the owner, suggesting she use her renter's insurance. She refused to pay, claiming the bill was inflated because of Obama's health care. Her mother even wrote a letter saying the same thing. That's when I decided enough was enough. My father helped me file a lawsuit after they ignored our settlement letters for 18 months. Their attorney reached out offering to settle for less than the medical and vet bills, but I declined. Fortunately, I documented everything: photos of the injuries, bills, treatment records, and all our communications. In court, they tried everything. The owner accused me of trespassing, but the judge pointed out how she couldn't know that since she wasn't even home. When she tried claiming my own dog had bit me, the judge questioned why she hadn't reported it to animal control during their investigation. After 4 hours of their ridiculous arguments, the judge had enough. He declared it was a clear case of irresponsible pet ownership and a waste of the court's time. He ordered them to pay all my medical bills, vet bills, court fees, plus $100 for emotional and physical damages. But he wasn't done. Given the severity of the incident and her apparent lack of responsibility, he ordered mandatory professional training for her dog within 30 days, requiring proof to be submitted to the court. He warned that failure to comply would result in a fine of $500 per day. The owner's face turned white. By the time everything was done, she had to pay over $2,500, plus the cost of professional dog training. Last I heard, she moved out of the neighborhood a few months later. My golden and I still take our daily walks, but now we carry pet deterrent spray just in case. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with stage 3 lymphoma. The diagnosis came right after my husband and I had finally saved enough to buy our dream house with a big backyard, perfect for the dog we'd always wanted. But instead of picking out puppy beds and toys, I found myself picking out wigs and scheduling chemotherapy sessions. After 6 brutal months of treatment, my oncologist finally gave me some good news. The cancer was responding well. I was still weak, bold, and honestly looked like death warmed over, but I was alive. That's when my husband suggested we revisit the idea of getting a dog, something to give me a reason to get up and moving every day, he said. We found this rescue organization that seemed legitimate enough. They were a local chapter of some big national group, had all the proper paperwork, and their facility looked clean and well maintained. That's where we met him, this sweet, gentle German Shepherd mix who immediately stole our hearts. When we asked about his background, the site director gave us what seemed like a rehearsed speech. She told us they had found him wandering the streets about a week ago, and that their vet had thoroughly checked him out. According to her, he was around 2 years old and perfectly healthy. I noticed he seemed a bit slow getting up and expressed my concern, asking if he was okay since he appeared to have trouble standing. The staff vet quickly jumped in to dismiss my concerns, explaining it away as normal behavior. He claimed the dog was just adjusting to the shelter environment and that some dogs get a bit stiff from the kennel beds. Something felt off, but I was so excited about having a dog that I ignored my instincts. We paid the adoption fee and took him home. The first week was wonderful. He was gentle, loving, and despite being a bit lethargic, he seemed happy. Then the seizures started. The first one happened during breakfast. One moment he was eating, the next he was on his side convulsing violently. We rushed him to our vet, who took one look at him and ordered immediate tests. The results were devastating. Our vet delivered the heartbreaking news with visible sympathy. He explained that our dog wasn't 2 years old at all. Based on his teeth and other indicators, he was at least 10, possibly older. He then pointed out the masses, confirming advanced cancer. The seizures weren't new either. There was evidence of brain involvement. I felt something snap inside me. Here I was, fighting cancer myself, and these people had knowingly given us a dying dog, had watched him suffer seizures in their care, and said nothing. The next day I walked into that rescue facility looking every bit the cancer patient I was. Bold, pale, with that sickly gray undertone that chemotherapy gives you. The site director recognized me immediately and started with her rehearsed sympathy face. She tried to brush off the situation, saying she was sorry for our loss, but sometimes these things just happen. I cut her off immediately, telling her that things don't just happen. I accused her of knowing the truth and deliberately lying to us. I launched into everything the vet had found. Every single sign they would have had to deliberately ignore. When the staff vet tried to interrupt, I turned my full fury on him. I confronted him about their claim of not having money to visually inspect dogs, pointing out they had cameras in every kennel. I demanded to know why they couldn't spare 5 minutes to watch him having seizures on those cameras. The staff vet tried to defend himself by saying they couldn't be expected to monitor every dog constantly. I shot back, asking if they could at least look at them once. I pointed out that the dog's teeth alone showed his age and questioned whether they had even opened his mouth during their supposedly thorough examination. The site director tried to deflect again, making excuses about not being able to afford extensive testing. I shut that down immediately, telling her it costs nothing to simply say they weren't sure about his age, instead of lying about it. I pointed out that it also costs nothing to mention he had seizures in their care. Because of their lies, we had spent his last weeks trying to treat him instead of keeping him comfortable. I left that day and went nuclear. I posted our story everywhere: local Facebook groups, rescue forums, review sites. I named names. I detailed everything, including their excuses about not having money to look at dogs they were selling. I posted screenshots of their adoption papers, claiming he was healthy and young. The response was overwhelming. Other families came forward with similar stories. Local news got involved. Within a month, both the staff vet and site director were fired. But I wasn't done. Every time they tried to get new jobs in animal care, their prospective employers would find my posts and the news stories. Last I heard, they're both working retail now. The rescue underwent a complete overhaul of their evaluation procedures, and the new management actually admits when they're uncertain about a dog's health or history. We did eventually adopt again, this time from a different rescue, and yes, they were completely upfront about our new dog's health issues. She's currently snoring on my feet as I type this, gray muzzle and all. I was in my junior year at what you could call a special public high school. It wasn't your regular school. It was a magnet school with this program for gifted students from all around the county. I say gifted loosely because some kids just got lucky with the entrance exam, but couldn't really handle the program's demands. The most crucial part of junior year was this research practicum course. You had to pass it to move on to senior year, and the grading was simple but brutal. 50% for a year-long project and 50% for the final exam. No room for error there. There was this girl in my class, the sweetest, quietest person you'd ever meet. She was brilliant, always getting straight A's, but she didn't fit the popular mold. She was a bit heavier, never wore makeup, and always had her hair in this messy ponytail. The mean girls at school made her their favorite target. Leading this pack of wolves was this one girl I'll call Karen. She was your typical mean girl queen bee, and everywhere she went, her little group followed. They'd always whisper and snicker about the quiet girl's weight or clothes, saying things like how badly they wanted to fix her. But you know what? The quiet girl never let it get to her. She just kept being kind to everyone, head held high. One day, something weird started happening in our research practicum class. Karen, who was in there with her sidekick and two popular guys, suddenly started being super nice to the quiet girl. I mean, suspiciously nice. The quiet girl politely thanked Karen for offering to be her partner. Karen responded with an overly enthusiastic acceptance and complimented her sweater, claiming it brought out her eyes. Karen's sidekick jumped in, suggesting they should all hang out sometime. The fakeness was painful to watch. I watched this go on for weeks. They'd sit near her, act like they were best friends, and shower her with fake compliments. It was painful to watch, but the quiet girl just smiled and went along with it. Then came final exam day. We all got our question sheets and scanned and answer forms. I noticed the quiet girl purposely leaving her answers visible, and sure enough, Karen and her gang were all sneakily copying them down. Karen whispered, asking about number 15. The quiet girl shifted her paper slightly to give them a better view. One of the popular guys leaned over and thanked her, calling her the best. The whole scene was like watching a carefully orchestrated cheating operation. One by one, they finished copying and turned in their tests, looking mighty pleased with themselves. But what happened next? Oh man, it was beautiful. The quiet girl waited until the last one turned in their test, then started erasing all her answers. She filled in completely different ones, the correct ones, and turned in her test with the biggest smile I've ever seen. When the grades came out, Karen was shocked and demanded to know how she could have failed. The teacher told her she'd need to retake the course over summer. Karen's sidekick started to protest, almost slipping up by mentioning they all got the same answers before catching herself. The teacher pointed out the interesting coincidence that they all had exactly the same wrong answers, with a knowing look that said everything. All four of them had to spend their summer retaking that class, while the quiet girl sailed through with a perfect score. They couldn't even complain about the cheating without admitting what they'd done themselves. I graduated years ago, but I still think about that sweet, sweet revenge. Last I heard, the quiet girl is absolutely crushing it in life. Great job, happy marriage, living her best life. Meanwhile, Karen had to explain to her parents why she needed summer school to graduate. I still can't believe what happened last week. I need to share this story because it's just too ridiculous not to tell. My ex and I dated for 3 years. We met at a coffee shop where I worked as a barista while struggling to finish my computer science degree. Back then, I was barely making ends meet, living in a tiny studio apartment and surviving mostly on instant noodles and coffee shop leftovers. She was a regular customer who always ordered the same thing, an oat milk latte with an extra shot and light foam. She worked as a mid-level manager at some corporate office downtown and always came in wearing these expensive-looking suits. After weeks of small talk, she finally asked me out. I'll admit, she did help me a lot during our relationship. She encouraged me to apply for better internships, helped me polish my resume, and even paid for a few professional certification courses that definitely boosted my career prospects. When I landed my first software developer job, she insisted I move in with her since her apartment was closer to my new office. The relationship started going downhill about 6 months ago. My career really took off. I got promoted to senior developer and my salary nearly doubled. Suddenly, she started acting weird about money. She'd remind me about every dinner she paid for when we first started dating, every gift she'd ever bought me, even the certification courses. It got to the point where she was keeping a literal spreadsheet of investments she'd made in me. The final straw came when she demanded I pay her a percentage of my new salary as returns on her investment. That's when I realized how toxic things had become. I moved out, found my own place, and ended the relationship. Fast forward to last week. I was working from home when my doorbell rang. There she was, a fancy suitcase in hand. She boldly announced that she was moving back in. When I told her that wasn't happening and reminded her we had broken up and this was my apartment, she just got more aggressive. She declared that half of everything I owned was rightfully hers, claiming she had made me who I am today. She actually tried to push past me into the apartment. When I blocked her, she pulled out a folder. She started listing off all her supposed investments in me over our 3 years together. She mentioned the $487 for my advanced programming certification, $2,300 in dining expenses, $350 for the suit I wore to my first interview, and even brought up how she had paid half for the laptop I used for coding. I tried to explain that those were gifts and she couldn't just show up and demand things, but she cut me off. She started ranting about how without her, I'd still be making minimum wage and living off instant noodles. She insisted she deserved returns on her investment, and since I wouldn't pay her directly, she'd take it in assets. She started listing out what she wanted: half my clothes, including stuff I bought after we broke up, half my furniture, half the food in my fridge, and even half of my gaming console collection. When I refused, she sat down in the hallway. She threatened that she wouldn't leave until she got what was hers. Then she tried to blackmail me, saying she'd tell everyone how I used her to climb the corporate ladder and then dumped her. I called the police. While waiting, I recorded her entire rant about her investments and returns. When the officers arrived, she actually tried to show them her spreadsheet of expenses. The officers explained to her that these were gifts given during a relationship and she had no legal claim to any of it. She protested, waiving her proof of payment and insisting she had developed me like a business project. She didn't even get to finish her sentence about her investment before the officers cut her off. They gave her a choice: leave voluntarily or be charged with harassment. She chose to leave, but not before shouting that she'd be contacting her lawyer. The next day, I received a formal letter from a law firm demanding compensation for career development services rendered. I forwarded it to my company's legal team, who not only sent a cease and desist letter, but also told her employer about her behavior. Turns out, her company has strict policies about employees using their position to exploit others for financial gain. They launched an internal investigation. She's been suspended pending investigation. She tried calling me yesterday, crying about how I ruined her career, but I just blocked her number. My gaming console collection and I are doing just fine without her investments. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.